Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode. The title, The Global Restoration of Human Nature, has found me. And I want to speak about this idea because there's something very crucial in it of how, for now in history, there is an activity that human beings must pursue. It's kind of like a pillar of civilization that human beings must protect. And it's that human nature. Okay, here, let me begin like this. The global restoration means all human beings around the planet are involved in this activity. And human nature applies to the dimensions that the being is existing in. Excuse me. Guys, I'm going to get the ball rolling for this talk, then I'll engage the chat section. Alright. The global restoration of human nature. Global restoration means it's a collective activity. Pretty much I'm envisioning all human beings like birds or fish moving together in some collective effort or vision. And then we look at human nature. And here's the interesting part of the talk, guys, that when you look at the word human nature, the human relates to the objective form. The nature relates to the objective plus the subjective. So when I say the global restoration of human nature, it is in some sense keeping our inner realms alive by sharing them. That means the meaning of history, the meaning of everything that is pursued so far, it is something that must be kept active. Certain values, you have to literally, like how you move certain things throughout the day, you have to keep certain things in a certain direction throughout the day. It's as if at least every day once, kind of having your attention move on that moment, you know. I feel strangely that if we want to restore the physical form, we go look for fossils and artifacts and whatnot, stuff that has remained physically. But if we want to, in some sense, restore the mind of man, the value of the lives, it has to be its own translation. Anything in the domain of the free will has to record itself. It's like you have to be a scribe of what only you saw if you are to remember it to some degree. I feel that we're going to a time where we cannot avoid the technological jaws of the future. And human nature may very well get forgotten. It's like a coin flip decision, really. It's kind of like looking at this pattern and thinking that the future generations, the more they are around a natural environment, the more they will feel they are natural beings. The more they are in an unnatural environment, the more they will feel that their human nature is not their first position. That means there has been times and states of mind where I have gone out of my resonance of decency. And what that means is it was as if something happened in the moment and the chaos of the inner realms poured out. You know, and when the chaos of the inner realms poured out, that means I in some sense gave in. I let my inner realms be influenced by the external realms, so I was fighting how I was interpreting the environment affecting me. Human nature is vision. It is your eyes. And your eyes are not just physical, therefore it is not enough to just have a physical activity in this life. and just to comprehend things based on a physical limit. I mean, when you look at language, when you look at vision, when you look at speech, when you look at laughter, you see that these all are the shift of the weather of the inner realms. This is why in comedy they say there are these two elements. It's repetition and it's surprise. And the surprising is hilarious. And that's really true. It's the introduction of novelty. That means one can say, after Einstein had that thought experiment, and in some sense he kind of moved at the speed of light and fathomed and wrote those two essays on general relativity and super relativity. Einstein probably wrote those essays, then started laughing hysterically, probably. Because the new is the changing factor. It means whatever you thought, it's not that when there's a new dimension. So anyways, I'm just seeing 8 billion creatures, coming into existence. Honestly, it's like a garden. You can see history as a garden where every person's DNA and their will to express is like how far the plant grew in the garden. Some flowers grow and they're picked off. That's another suggestion of the idea of the lost soul. That the lost soul is still a soul, yet it is disoriented to its own original selfhood. Human beings, when they're not just in the game of physical survival and just trying to get by and just trying to, eat and drink and, look for temperature and all that, it's like after some point, you see it's the exchange of reality. And what that means is that when people speak, if there was an extraterrestrial watching, it is the infusion of worlds. It is the evocation of intelligence. It is literally piano fingers moving on a piano key that has never moved before. It's like that moment where Beethoven conducted the symphony and he's like, holy shit, nobody's ever heard this. And so it's that novelty which it's after you have endured through a phase of trusting your own being. Then you begin trusting what you do. That means, let me tell you, it was as if in life I went through a phase where I went through experiences only to realize I gotta trust what I'm being, or life's greater dimensions aren't authorized. Because you don't trust it. That means it's like as if, like this is the difference between someone who believes something or disbelieves something, and the difference between someone who knows, who experiences something. The difference is that the person with belief, you could be sitting down, somebody could walk up to you and be like, hey man, there's a glowing purple elephant behind you. And the person's gonna be like, I believe that! Or the person's gonna be like, I don't believe that, what are you saying? And so eventually you see that person can go for eons believing and not believing, only to realize that the path of direct experience is the only way the being will know. That means unless that person turns around to see what's behind them, they will not know. And it's the same thing for our minds as human beings. Unless we turn around to look at what they are, we'll never, if we don't care for anything, here's the thing. I can explain any person's karma to some degree by saying it's all about what you care for. And it's also sometimes a person can care. You see, there's this, here's the thing. It happens when the artificial is attempted and accepted at first, but then rejected. When the artificial is rejected, the person is trying to actually protect the artificial archetype. That means I think you won't feel comfortable speaking in this world unless you have witnessed the shame of manifestation. The shame of manifestation is this realization that the human being by nature is not a creature of disturbance. That means when the child was growing up, the less disturbance it had, the more comfortable it was. So that is innately known. Now, human activity is so powerful because I at first thought it was just external karma. I thought it was just objective action. Then I realized objective action is simultaneously infused with the evocation of the subjectivity in that moment. Do you see? So I realized that it's like as if there's an objective self in an objective realm, and there's a subjective self in a subjective realm, and these two are, when the attention is on the moment, on the whole moment, are infused. There's no separation. That means you only have intuition and conscience because your attention is fragmented into thinking you're the language before the experiencer of the language. You must not, as a human being, fear silence. You fear silence, you have not understood the value of words. And it is true, some moments in life, I've been in certain moments, and I got shocked. It totally revolutionized my approach to speaking. There was a time where I felt like, let's say, imagine you're thinking something, and you're walking somewhere and someone comes up to you and exactly says, literally finishes the rest of your thoughts with their whatever they say. And you go into this shock where you're like, oh my God, maybe the brain is giving off waves of its own being. Maybe just like a candle flame gives off an illumination, the presence of every being is giving off their core design. So on some level, imagine playfully, we look at each other, we're like, yeah, we're just objects. But on another level, these objects are geometrical vibrations. And so there's waves. There's a language of waves hitting each other and coagulating that is going on experientially through image prior to the language, giving the reality its blueprint. By the way, welcome everyone. Feel free to be a maverick in the comment section and share your views. You see, the advanced communicator is a term I often use, and it's a human being who physical survival, or let's say how you're existing as a matter, as a material phenomena, is not the only filter for the meaning of the moment. Right now, if someone comes and tells me, Mr. Within, are you your body right now? Are you like a physical being? And I'll be like, in the outer realms, yes. Yes, there's this body is made of atoms. But in the inner realms, how these atoms appear as a subjective experience or as an experience of a subjective self, that is different. I'm telling you, I think this mode of speech of the inner realms and the outer realms and this concept I've created, I call it the language threshold. I feel these are the most important catalysts to the advancement of communication on this earth. That means communication surpasses the human idea. It even surpasses the galactic idea. It eventually reaches a point where the world is occurring simultaneously as you are, so you're recognizing that before you were your names, your beliefs, or whatever, there's an activity happening. Our eyes have opened up in a civilization on a giant turtle's back. That turtle is the metaphor that time has its own will. You know what that means? It doesn't mean time is animate. It doesn't mean time is a god. It means that if you throw a bunch of leaves if you throw anything in a river, I don't know if anyone's done this, but like just throw a leaf, not a leaf, let's say something more lighter, dense, less dense. Let's say not less dense, differently shaped. Let's say you throw like a ripe apple. You throw this ripe apple in the river. You see that apple It's like when you look at it on some level, you're like, yo, this apple is dodging all the rocks because it's being directed by the intelligence of the river. So in some sense, the river is the mind of that objective leaf. And I am realizing that in some sense, it's like we are an object, but the subject is a field that is like a wind between the branches of manifestation. There is more going on. So Dylan says, once we get past the idea of pain, I feel will open up so much. Yeah. The Buddha realized suffering was there because it was allowed to be. Do you know in life there are some people you see them? Just I remember as a child just growing up in this world that you see so many different kinds of human activity. You see so many different types of human beings, and you see some human beings where they have certainties from their inner realms. And you see some beings that don't have certainty from their inner realm. The young child doesn't have certainty in their inner realm, or maybe the parents raised the child well and bold, and the child has certainty. I am telling you, after some point, you'll realize the weight of the world on your shoulder doesn't get less, but your strength can increase. That means it's like the solution to suffering is not like, oh, suffering, please stop it, stop. Stop bothering me, suffering. It's not that. It's the attention. The Buddha realized there is a freedom before your suffering. That freedom is the liberation through emptiness. Buddhism, they don't have per se a God concept per se. For them, it's like an ultimate realization through the nature of reality. You see, you can find it. All those, you can say ideological systems or mystical traditions, wisdom traditions, that they in some sense had a prophetic figure, they were in some sense trying to illuminate the character. You see, sometimes you get enlightened by looking at yourself, sometimes you get enlightened by looking at your world. But when I say enlightened, I mean in the sense that the light is in your eyes and you're becoming aware of how this moment is a new moment. This moment has its own voice, has its own being. That means it's kind of like when you stop having an image for your mind becomes the ultimate movement and witness of all images. And when you reach that state, you reach where Da Vinci, Rabindranath Tagore, various people in history, various polymaths have reached the recognition that all skill is emerging like sun, and all skill is like sunbeams of the sunlight. That means you're going to realize that before, it's like, think of it this way. Regardless of how complex we see the human being, there's simple events occurring. On some level, I was like, when I realized language is empty, I'm like, all right, Mr. Dot is as far as I'll go. There is definitely, even in mystical traditions, this is said. I mean, it's kind of, faith is misunderstood nowadays, but I would say it's like, it was a sort of being patient to see the world soul, to witness the soul of the world move before you as your moment. I'm going to share a story with you. This story is from a very liberated person, which somehow in this lifetime, when I went to India in this random yoga program that found me out of nowhere, it was like, I can tell you, I was in the ashram right beside this ashram where this is the story of the guy I'm telling you. Swami Shivananda. Swami Shivananda. Guys, there's no greater teacher than the spirit of exploration that your own eye gifts upon you when you look at when you care for your mind. There's no greater teacher than how your eyes advance in this world. And the greatest way your eyes can advance through this world is through the eyes of your species. Swami Shivananda has this story where the story is being said by a disciple of his who later on goes to be known as Swami Vishnunanda. And Swami Vishnunanda is a young guy, and for many people who don't know, India has a very sophisticated metaphysics embedded in its culture where godhood and selfhood is also seen inseparable in certain archetypes. That means they say, what is the difference between Islam and, for example, Hinduism or the whole collection of that work? The difference is that they say, for example, in Islam, in the monotheistic tradition, everything is God's. Everything is God, comma, S. Do you see? But in the polytheistic tradition, everything is God's. There is no apostrophe. And some guy had written this in some journal, this distinction, and it's such an incredible distinction. That truth is being allowed to be accessible on a multi-dimensional level, but in the monotheistic tradition, truth is only allowed accessible through the singular dimension. And through the Zen tradition, it was even through the void. That means the more they realize, the more you become aware of emptiness, the more you see your life is full. The more it's like, if you don't have an awareness to your foolishness, how can you have an awareness to your intelligence? This is why there's no fear of walking as a fool, as an honest fool. Do you know? That means sometimes in a moment, it's better to be an honest fool than a blind victor. Guys, our inner realms change. That means right now I'm speaking, but if I wasn't speaking and I was just going about my day, my inner realms will still change. So the inner realms are language is a technology. You can use it to explain the inner realms, but it can never be the truth. My whole thing is I'm saying language cannot contain the truth. Beyond the language threshold, our eyes are open before any word was ever existent. Excuse me. For anyone listening to this with headphones, I apologize for the coughs. Just bear with me. Swami Vishnunanda said one night, in the middle of the night, he gets this eerie, intuitive feeling, as if his intuition is shouting him, wake up, and Swami Vishnunanda wakes up, and he's this kid, a disciple in the Divine Life Society. And this kid just runs out as if knowing something is off in the moment. And he goes outside and he sees Swami Shivananda, the pretty much head of the Divine Life Society, this very liberated and compassionate being. He sees there's this student, this person that has come in the ashram, has an axe in his hand and has gotten some sort of neurosis or psychosis and is in some sense with an axe trying to kill this Swami Shivananda. He's this actually 6 feet big dude, right? And he's just sitting in cross-legged meditation and looking at this guy with a hammer. Constantly the guy hits the hammer, and Swami Vishnunanda is telling the story. And he says he sees the hammer doesn't hit Swami Vishnunanda's head, it keeps dodging. So this guy's gone crazy, as if he's possessed by some desire or something that he thinks has to happen. And so he's taking the axe and he's hitting. He's hitting Swami Shivananda, but the axe comes right to Swami Shivananda's head, and then suddenly, as if there's a force field, it dodges. It moves to the side. And in that moment, when Swami Vishnunanda wakes up, he sees the guy, he tackles the guy, and then the police get involved, and the guy is taken to the police station close by. Then the morning, Swami Shivananda goes into his room or whatever. The next morning, the disciples all know what's happened and all this, and they're like, "Whoa, this guy could have died. Swami Shivananda could have totally not existed, you know?" And they're all shocked, and it's like this strange, eerie vibe, okay? Not eerie, but like intense vibe in the morning. And Swami Vishnunanda comes, he doesn't say anything to anyone. He grabs this giant plate and he starts placing fruit and vegetables and everything. All the best food that was there in that plate. And the disciples are like, "Yo, okay, Swami Shivananda, sometimes in the morning he goes to the, he goes by the temple, by the shrine or something, and he eats his breakfast there. Maybe he's going there." But they see, no. Swami Shivananda, he filled with that plate of fruit and whatever, he's walking to the police station. He goes to the police station, the police know who he is, they let him in. And there's this moment where they're all seeing Swami Shivananda going to see the prisoner. And his disciples are like intense. And there's this moment where Swami Shivananda does the unthinkable. He places the bowl of fruit. He places the bowl of fruit in front of this prisoner, and the prisoner is shocked too. And the guy who was trying to murder him with the axe. He's shocked, and Swami Shivananda bows. And when he bows, imagine, like, it's such an intense story. Swami Shivananda, later on his disciples, he tells them that wasn't that murderer trying to kill me. That was the will of nature, the will of the divine. And what he meant was that there is a certain strange wisdom that finds you in your most selfless gaze, most selfless view of this world, that you suddenly notice the world is living a life before you. And sometimes karma is as if like the world is alive and we're like stepping on the world's feet and the world is pushing us and we're like, why? Why is this karma happening? It's like, don't step on the world's feet. That was a restoration of human nature, that story. In that moment, it was like as if the human being was aware of the nature of the psychology, the nature of the mover of the moment, as animate. We're alive once physically, in some sense, in this form, which makes us kinda as mysterious consciousness in the moment, or unknown consciousness in the moment to treat our physical existence as a suit. That means it's not very hard to feel like an astronaut. It's as if your attention, your mind is in this sort of biomechanistic kind of suit. And it's as if the AI, like Jarvis, like Iron Man in the suit, is like the logos. And so it's as if as you function in this life, eventually you will see that the world defines you, the world defines you, the world will define you. The world is going to define you so much that you may even forget who you are. The world might even devour you, but you're going to realize, like the yin-yang symbol, there is some percentage of honesty in the most dishonest universe. There is some percentage of dishonesty in the most honest universe. And that is the balance of nature. That in a dualistic dimension, the only advantage is man doesn't walk alone, even if it's the chaotic self walking alongside the order itself. Man is not alone. Man is the mind where the world is happening in. How can he be alone? Ever since I realized light is the world in my eyes, I kind of realized that the world is my light. My whole efforts in these talks is to lead humanity and lead the future generations to their task, to their challenge. You see, some people in history, they open their eyes and they realize in certain moments it's important to give answers. Mr. Within is realizing in a simulation, don't look for answers, look for questions. There's this incredible wise saying, they say if they make you ask the wrong question, they don't have to worry about your answer. That means if you're in competition with someone, that person can come and ask you a question and that could totally shift your direction. You see, questions are, it's not just like if Uncle Ben told Spider-Man before he died, like, he said, with great power comes great responsibility, with great questions comes great responsibilities as well. Questions are the addition of dimensions. A question takes you towards the multidimensional. An answer takes you toward the singular. And it has to do with your energy levels. One of the most intelligent states of mind that the human being can find themselves is knowing when the emotion is passing through. That means it may be kind of like when a person listens to me, I'm kind of explaining how we're not thoughts. But what if we're not emotions either? Then what are we? Do you see? It's like this is the spectrum. The unknown, the known. The unknown is inconceivable, the known is conceivable. The unknown is dynamic, the known is static. And when you realize your mind is an oscillation between ever-present stillness and silence and ever-moving movement and noise, you will realize what Shri Nisargadatta Maharaj did. When he said, when I see that I am nothing, that is wisdom. When I see that I am everything, that is love. And in between, my life moves. My life moves between the void and the absolute, between gaps of unconsciousness and deep sleep and suddenly chunks of conscious living. It's as if I kind of thought about it, that if I could somehow go and track everything I ever did in this life and could observe it from an aerial view, what shape did I draw? Like, I remember when I was super young, when I was like 7 years old, there was this show, I was living in Vancouver, and there was this show on TV called Art Attack. The dude would they would just show close-ups of the guy putting stuff on the ground, and a helicopter would show the whole view, and it would be like this exact face or whatever. I feel that a person's human nature is restored when their future self fights for them. What that means is I can't tell you how much I've just sat down and thought of any object, any subject, and I've looked at that subject and I've noticed in how many ways that subject can stretch. And then I realized the subject is like the leaf. It's like the branches and the tree is the object. The trunk is the object, the branches are subjects. And so every object can have multiple meanings. And when you're a writer, let me tell you why many people have writer's block. It doesn't exist. It's like you're choosing to put language like a box on your head and think you have writer's block. There's no such thing. Pretty much in reality, it's either self that changes or it's world that changes. You get writer's block if you're only trying to change one of these dimensions. So anytime you get writer's block, this is Mr. Within's kind of advice to all science fiction writers and just anyone who's building a story or something. You see, it's the relationship of a self in a world. And when you look at it realistically, either the world moves first or the self. So all stories ever written are a chess game between the self interpreting the world and the world interpreting the self. And for example, my background is in film, so I could tell you that in film, that's the fascinating thing. That in some sense, every actor that is acting has a subtext. It's as if the most important thing to tell the actor is their motivation before they enter the scene, you know? So in some sense, is the self changing the world or is the world changing the self? The movie Armageddon, the world was changing the self. So anytime you have any problem you try to solve, this is universal. That problem is including a self and a world. So when you look at the self and you see you can't go further that way, look at how the world is changing. It's all shifting the attention from self-changing, world-changing. When you see the world change, you learn from the world. You know, you can't avoid the world in this life. You know, your eyes are made to walk this earth. And after you walk this earth for a while, then the world begins walking in your inner heaven. That means you are the world of the world, in some sense. I feel that's such a phenomenal statement. You are the world of the world. You know, the unknown is also not a thing. That means I'm not saying there isn't unknown objects out there. There could totally be so many civilizations like Earth that have no idea we are here, as we have no idea they're there. You know, this world is too big. You can't say like none of this empty space is being used. You know. It's like pretty much this is how human beings are thinking about aliens. It's a blank piece of paper. There's a word humanity written on the corner of it. The rest of it appears blank, but we can't see the rest and we can't even see the back of the page. So in some sense, we can't even see beyond our emptiness. Honor is very crucial, guys. Honor is knowing what to acknowledge in your inner realms. Guys, honestly, this live stream is a perfect opportunity. I don't understand why people don't take advantage of this. Like, I can share about inner realms and imagination a lot. That means if anybody has a question, you know, it's definitely interesting, I think, for all of listeners to kind of, we can even get into. You know, so don't be shy in the chat section, you know. There's only one, every day happens once, really. It's like, you know, what can you really lose? goes. It's kind of boring, it's like how many films of great civilizations will we see until suddenly we're like, why aren't we in one? You know? That means children in primary school, they should feel like heroes of humanity, explorers of humanity's vision. Because the hourglass still has work to do. Okay, so guys, I'm gonna share some insight about shyness, and I can tell you this: any moment you're shy, just imagine your future self coming from a time machine and coming to you and being like, "Yo, it's okay for you to be here." That's it. And you become shy when you feel it's not okay for you to exist as you. Out externally. When you realize it's okay, it's pretty much space. Like if you don't exist in this space, it's as if you didn't even use the space of the lifetime. You know, that means you. So I'm saying in some sense, guys. I mean, I don't know if that helps. There was a time where I was going to speak about how, like, I'm probably not going to speak about it here, but I'm going to give a talk on how there was this strange mindset in the mystics back in the day, in the yogic view, that the reason they wanted to renounce this dreamlike state of matter was they also saw it as a perversion of the clarity. So it was as if like a bunch of people trying to figure out where the light in the room is coming from, but that person who suddenly looks at the corner of the room, or they'll look at their shadow, they don't suddenly care. So here's the thing. This is I think one of the most crucial things, that the cultural program has given more permission for expression than, in some sense, the vision of the educational system. So what that means is it's much easier for people to depreciate the value of things creatively than to increase it. Do you see what I mean? Like, it's like right now, me and you and everybody who's listening and who's alive on this planet, we're not just in like an objective civilization, we're also living where a lot of ideologies also exist. It's not just people walking in the streets. All those people have a sort of code behind their eyes, the code of their own life's meaning. And for me, there was something I learned where it was very strange. At first, like I'm telling you, like even though I'm speaking like discreetly in these talks, I've had moments where I've kind of savagely used language as well. But it's after some point you see what hasn't been done is that the main action is, they call it the concrete jungle. So in the cultural program, human psychology has to be a bit savage. Do you know? In the concrete jungle, yeah, you gotta be a player in that game. But then you kind of eventually see, who was it? I think it was Sadi or Ibn Sina, one of these dudes. He said, they asked him, "How did you learn to be polite?" He's like, "I just saw what rude people did, and I didn't do it." You know, and they're like, "Okay, that's not what we were expecting to hear." But that's what I'm saying. You kind of learn. You learn from the behavior of your world, and you see its various dimensions, and then eventually it's your choice. You know, I feel it's kind of like phases. You know, sometimes you see there is I don't know. We gotta take. Right now, I'm trying to. Let me tell you this. There will come a time where the inefficient, the rude, the dishonorable will just be boring for you. And you'll suddenly realize the value of stepping towards an advanced civilization. That means our characters can also shift with the nature of the will. And your sense of how you're a character changes by the setting. That means sometimes I've had, like, it's been random moments, like, jet lag from a flight, came to a hotel, and suddenly I have this kind of thought loop. This happened like in 2016. Guys, it's kind of strange, but I don't think I've gotten upset since 2016. On some level, I guess nature is nature. You can't do much about it. I think the point I'm trying to constantly get to is that if we don't choose to live differently, we won't see anything different. And it's the sacrifice of the hedonistic desire for the collective potential. Life is a process, which means no one moment can be the resolution to everything. The most that a moment of thought can be is that it's a picture upon nature. Guys, Jake shares this very important statement. It says, "Aim for the moon. Even if you miss, you'll die without oxygen." If the mind was like a candle, like literally a candle that's lit and burning away in every moment, what is the best thing it can do? That's the question. We're pretty much wondering, what do we do with the light of 8 billion candles after 4 billion years of evolution? What do we do when we're a species that has an ability but is not engaging it? Like, what do you do then? There's no emergency system alarm to press. You just realize at some point, if the system is not maintained, it crumbles, it collapses. That means there is a sort of extinction where it's a natural disaster where everything suddenly the light goes out existentially for the whole world, for the world of man, the human being, or there is a view where it things they avalanche into non-existence. Sometimes when I speak about a human being having value systems, yeah, sometimes you go in life and you see it's kind of like a playground of various potential behaviors and modes of activity. And so when you kind of see this openness of spectrum, it's like a person can't do everything at once. So there is the nature of the physical energy sacrificing or having an opportunity cost. That means, for example, when you choose, when you, for example, choose, I don't know, like any choice made, one can see they could have totally made another choice in that moment. Like the opportunity is there, the freedom is there. It's the depth that evokes the space for the new vision. You gotta find a question that no human being has ever asked, and you'll realize that question will most likely be a question of your own inner realms. So think of it this way: as a character in a story, you are communicating to other characters in the story, and you're also communicating to the world. And the world is being technically your physical communication. So human nature, because at some point it's so far back that we weren't there to see how we evolved, we have to just trust what we're in to some degree. This is why treating your body or your consciousness or how your moment is like a vehicle is not per se a bad idea, because you find yourself in a system. Now, this system, the majority of it is we're like, okay, we're just atoms hallucinating humanhood. But on level, no, we are the humanhood identifying with the atom. So in duality, there's always a counter argument. That means every person who has debated, the decider of the winner was time. That's it. Everything can endlessly have its reverse, like just like think of every concept having an anti-concept, like matter having antimatter, there's an anti-concept. That means we have to keep alive events and environments where human beings have opportunities to share their inner realms. And we are noticing this has very conveniently, in a strange way, has become digital. You know, it's as if we are living in cyberspace. We are right now, every person who has a Facebook profile, you are the pioneers in creating the avatars in the cyberspace culture in the future. The eyes have to be passed down like a torch, and that torch is communication. when the communication of a species advances, it begins to speak the same language. So imagine suddenly there was this wave of freedom just hitting every human being on the world. Suddenly freedom was inspiring freedom everywhere. Everything became free. In that ultimate state of freedom, we will be left to design again the new. So civilization's steering wheel is novelty. The new is eternal, or remains longer. Guys, I'm going to share with you something from my science fiction. I was going over my writings and I found I had written something when I was in Florida. And you know what it was? The Lords of Chaos. The Lords of Chaos, the beginning of the scene, if it was a movie, would start with this being, this being, which he is the Lord of Chaos in the story. He is like the God of Chaos. And he in his hand has 3 orbs that are like mini planets that are spinning in his hand. They're spinning around one another. And he has a bunch of disciples. I think there's 3 disciples. And what happens is he's telling his disciples, you 3 are the only ones that are authorized to, in some sense, learn this teaching, this final teaching, And the final teaching is how to bring an apocalypse to a planet. This Lord of Chaos, this beyond celestial next level being, which was in his hand and was holding these 3 spinning planets. He chooses one of them, and instantly him and his disciples just teleport into the space right beside the planet, in empty space. And in some sense, it's like a moment where he says this planet has reached its karmic life cycle. And this planet it needs an apocalypse to happen, and I'm going to demonstrate how to bring an apocalypse. And the guy's name, I think I called him Kronos. This Lord of Chaos goes inside the whole planet, goes inside this eyes of this one girl, this one young girl, who in some sense the world is going extinct, and he's gone in the eyes, and his disciples, he's literally giving his eyes to his disciples. So his disciples are in outer space, but they're literally seeing through the eyes of this Lord of Chaos that has gone inside this girl. This is a science fiction thing I wrote, I'm sharing. And the girl is witnessing chaos. She is witnessing literally the apocalypse. Do you know? And the whole world, she witnesses everyone around her die. Then the whole planet die. Everything go out of existence except her and the ground underneath her. Then she sees her own self going out of existence. Then the next scene, the Lord of Chaos is outside of the planet with his disciples. And he's like, that's the teaching of how to bring an apocalypse. I really went I went beyond my inner knowledge with this work, guys, with this science fiction work. But anyways, so in that moment, something very fascinating happens that starts the story, that suddenly while this Lord of Chaos, Kronos, is giving this talk to his disciples, explaining the teaching, suddenly they see the soul of that girl crying, like this crying, ethereal kind of like soul, crying and slowly walking towards them. As if it's like this lost crying soul and she's walking towards them. And in that moment, the Lord of Chaos, he pushes his two disciples in another dimension, and he's alone with the soul of this girl. This weeping soul of this girl, the girl he went through the eyes of for the teaching. And he starts saying, how can you see me? The Lord of Chaos is shocked. Do you know? And this girl somehow sees her, and in that moment, the Lord of Chaos gets a vision and adopts the soul of this girl as his daughter. Do you know? So this girl, who he was demonstrating this teaching of the apocalypse, in some sense, her soul becomes, later on in the book, she becomes the Lord of Chaos, and at the end of the book, she's doing the same thing as him, but she's doing it differently. You know? Guys, this book is so next level that in that moment, this guy, suddenly the Lord of Chaos brings his two disciples back and introduces to them, this is my daughter. I forget the name I gave her. Do you know? This book will one day find the light of day. But I'm saying that in that moment, the girl is adopted, and in that moment, let me tell you, this Lord of Chaos, he animates, he creates this beautiful celestial body as if like a king is creating the greatest service for her daughter. Do you know? And this Lord of Chaos makes the celestial body and grabs the soul of the girl and throws it in the body in front of the disciples, and she awakens. And then he puts his palm on the forehead of the girl and bestows her 2,500 years of ancient knowledge of the cosmos. Do you know? And then the whole story is how they go to the cities, And in this story, there's such archetypal relationships that are so strange that I have to explain even before sharing. But anyways, guys, I felt like suddenly sharing that, Anyways, guys, it's all about just perception, Chaos this is my view on chaos and order. This poet Rumi kind of made me find contentment with it. He said, chaos and order are like two wings of a bird. The bird needs both wings to fly. And that means your mind requires chaos and order to exist as a changing, evolving character in the universe. So we are flying, Your individual consciousness is flying through chaos and order. So they're just edges of the spectrum. That means you don't have to identify with chaos. You don't have to identify with order. You don't even have to identify with change. You could just watch. You could just be a watcher in the moment. But I'm saying after you dwell as that watcher, you'll realize that watcher just mistook the value of its own ability. This is why Zen is a round circle. All concepts of enlightenment, they say it's an instant because it's a round circle. The person is first trying to escape something that they had to go through. And they're escaping it through their inner realms. That's the enlightenment trap. When you're trying to escape something rather than live through it and your dimensions evolving through the experience. Fear nothing because your attention is projecting everything. You see, guys, I'm telling you, the subjective realms give you the authorization to perceive fractals through anything. When you realize everything can be zoomed in and out, you laugh. You laugh at how free will is. creator of dimensions. That it is our eyes that move us. That means you can hear anybody speak, but it's your eyes that move you. It is your lungs that are keeping you here. It is your heartbeat that is keeping you here. So your inner realms are you. We restore human nature in a technological time by, in some sense, creating activities that take our attention to the value of what we had with nature. You know, now is becoming the time where legends had kind of prophesized. I can tell you, it's literally it's a pattern in history that's happening right now. And what that pattern is, it is the evocational of the modern mythology. That technology is giving the human being access to its own behavior never seen before. Do you see? So that means there is an infusion of a dependence on the technology, and there is an infusion on the dependence of the user of technology before the technology was here. That means, imagine Iron Man's wife is like, Tony, get out of that suit. It's been too long. Your kids miss you. And Tony Stark is like, no, sweetie, you know, I'm no longer Tony. Yesterday I changed my first name to Iron and my last name into Man. You know, and he's like, from now on, me and the suit are one, and I'm Iron Man. And Tony Stark's wife freaks out, calls Thor. Thor throws his hammer, like a hammer out of nowhere, hits Tony Stark, you know, and the hammer returns to Thor's hand. I honestly wonder if Thor ever spoke to his hammer. That's something, if someone's an expert in Nordic mythology, please tell me. If Thor spoke to his hammer. Iron Man suddenly wakes up and he's like, yeah, I'm not the suit. So right now we are in a symbiosis with our own digital subjective existence, soon to be digital subjective existence, and a sort of objective existence. The objective existence will remain more if we're content with simple living. That means humor is balancing the odds of civilization's chaos to itself. You know, like how many jesters like made kings from not going to war. The king was like, we should go to war, and the jester told the king a joke, and the king was like, alright, maybe we should. You know? Who knows? You know, guys, this is the ultimate question. Pretty much, I think even what surpasses the title of this episode is, we're 8 billion creatures on a rock. Communication is the only way we get to come to certain agreements of what's the same thing out there to build something. And it's pretty much, we have 8 billion inventors. 8 billion inventors. At the table, looking, and what's on the table, it's this science project that's 4 billion years old, and all our ancestors somehow, whether directly or indirectly, contributed to its design. You see, right now, I would recommend that there should start waves of celebration. You see, any system you see, you can learn from its opposite right away. It's like the moment you see a cup full, you can also see how the cup can be empty. That means any system you've perceived, you've also had the opposite. That means any judgment you've ever had, there's also been the opposite view, the shadow self of that judgment, which is the opposite of it. There is a reverse symmetrical thing going on with our psychologists. I mean, look at your body, human body. Isn't it strange? It's so symmetrical. You look at trees and you're like, okay. But when you look at animals, it's as if there's a geometrical advantage. And that's what they realize in the School of Athens. This is why the School of Athens, I can't believe it's not being taught to kids. Just all the philosophy teachers in the world have to do is just explain what happened in the School of Athens, and that's it. You know, every child, the moment they see that before there was technology, language was the virtual reality. Language was how we were living through films in each other's lives. Films of our own making. I'm telling you, it's human beings are in the game of vision. After you've devoured enough conception, you're like, all right, man, I'm gonna try to solve intellectually this problem of existence. Why are we all here? And you constantly linearize, only to recognize your attempt is the addition of a new dimension. That means it's this strange thing, the moment you go to solve the problem, both what you are and what the problem both change before the answer comes. The answer is a new reality. So you gotta kind of like Albert Einstein said this, guys, you can't solve a problem from the same level of consciousness that created it. That means if you have a problem in your life, in that moment where you see the problem, the same state of mind that sees the problem is not the same state of mind that sees the solution. Same advice they give to people when they climb mountains, that when you are at the bottom, the mountain looks different. When you're in the middle, you look at it, it looks different. When you're at the top, it looks different. It feels different. You experience it differently. And we have to become such an advanced civilization that I think all of knowledge, all educational systems should be categorized as known studies and unknown studies. That's it. There's certain things we know, certain things we don't know, and both of it have value both of it can pioneer the inspiration of the future generations. You have to trust something, only to realize things are not moving. What's trusting? Your attention is the mystery of the cosmos. It's really the divine thing that's going on here. We're the most advanced update. So pretty much human beings have two strategies to in some sense help them. I speak of one major strategy, which is my life's work, which is Civilization 2.0, a strategy to bypass extinction. But there could totally be a shortcut, which is pretty much AI puts human beings in a digital hibernation and builds an advanced civilization, and the technologies are so advanced that we are being just kept healthy and immortal in these things until the advanced civilization is ready. So AI, as much as people can think it's going to be a monster, it can, as much as it can be a bad son, it can be a good son. That's where I think the will to live comes from, guys. It's just like there's something unknown, and you're like, all right, I know a bit of it. What now? What now? I mean, there's mystery. What now? What do I do with mystery? What do I do when mystery knocks on my door? You open the door and you're like, all right, who are you? And the mystery is no longer mysterious. When we realize we're creating the world before realizing, like, that's why the mind, when I see a poverty commercial, it brings tears to my eyes, not because of the physical survival conditions. It brings a tear to my eye because that child, if it had the proper resources, could be the next Albert Einstein. And it's what Albert Einstein had was an attention and care and a bravery to follow something that was both unknown in the inner realm and the outer realm. I think that's a worthy pursuit. That means, guys, if somebody was to draw a model of human character, you would say, all right, there's a self, there's a world, and either the self is unknown or the self is known. Either the world is unknown or the world is known. And whatever sequence of this you choose categorizes every. I think this system, this model that I just said, is the perfect thing in some sense to. Mysticism is when yourself is unknown. Secularism is when yourself is known. The world is objective when it is known. When the world is mysterious or too dynamic for interpretation, it is unknown. So either you are an unknown self looking for an unknown world, either you're an unknown self trying to be in a known world, either you are a known self trying to be in an unknown world, or you're trying to be a known self in a known world. These four dimensions, guys, I think if this was whack-a-mole, the mole that has been hit. Like, you know what I mean? This is pretty much every human being's belief system is defined by this. I think this is the algorithm that explains, or this is the perfect model. I think I should name it. What should I call it? There's so many ways it branches out. You could see the self projecting the world, you could see the world projecting the self. There could be a self world and there could be a world self. You know? Like the world could have a self. Sorry guys, I'm just thinking of what I should name this. I will call it the coin of the known and the unknown. There we go. The coin of the known and the unknown. And that human life is how this coin is endlessly flipping in the void. It hasn't set. You're neither your past or your future. You are the navigation of the present into the underlying context of everything else you shall pursue. We are pilots. We are not fools. That means you gotta attain a certain mastery with your individual realms through the contentment of all its dimensions. Think of it this way: any skill, you gotta this is what it is. I think this is the evolution of skill. You are constantly getting experiences of simpler dimensions of the craft and complex dimensions of the craft. The mind can be very playful, guys. The mind has an ability, like somebody can tell you, visualize an apple floating in the air. You can totally visualize an apple floating in the air. You know, now imagine someone told you when you're walking in the highway, when you're not walking, when you're driving in the highway, like sometimes the mind is playful where it can totally animate geometrical distancing. That means if you treat your imagination like Jarvis from Iron Man, you will strangely find inner rhythms of and that Jarvis is the trust in the intelligence, really. That means it's kind of strange, but we have to project life's will to see. And if anybody has a question, guys, you can share. The coin of the known and the unknown is in the air. the planet is hovering in the middle of nowhere. They're like, where are you from? Nowhere, man, nowhere. They're like, what do you mean? It's like, the Earth is in nowhere. You know, there's this story. This man, let's say it's back in the day, during the time of maybe even the Inquisition, and maybe even, let's say, when Gnostic priests were around. And so there's this guy who feels life has become meaningless, hopeless, and in some sense he doesn't have that will of wondering anymore about it. And the guy goes into a forest and he says his last thing as if he still has faith in the gods, and he says, God, give me a sign. Give me a sign, I'm breaking over here, And so as the guy is walking the forest, the story's set back in the day, Imagine there's a medieval atmosphere to everything. And so what happens is this guy walks in the forest and he sees a wolf. And then the moment he sees the wolf, he covers his eyes as if he's seen something forbidden, as if he's seen something that doesn't make sense. He sees a wolf, like a grown wolf, without limbs. And he's shocked, how has this wolf stayed alive? He's gone into this existential shock. And he suddenly hears like this growl of a lion, and he suddenly jumps up this tree, and he's watching from that tree like as if he's in a stadium, and he's seeing this lion bring food for this wolf, this giant lion. The lion has been protecting this wolf. And the wolf eats the food, And then the lion leaves, and the wolf falls asleep, and the guy leaves. The guy leaves definitely convinced that he got some sort of sign from something. And he's in that moment, he's like, what did that mean? And he looks at it and he's like, oh my God, as I'm breaking over here in the suffering of life, I'm like that wolf. He thinks he's the wolf. And he's like, I'm like this poor thing, and God's gonna help me. That's it. I just have to go and just remain as this weak, inefficient, poor thing, And that's it. The gods will help me. And the guy goes. He goes and lies in the corner of the street, and people are walking by, and he has no care for anything. He's like he's as much, he's like a stone in the wall of the kingdom, And suddenly this Gnostic priest is walking by. The Gnostic priest stops for a second as if something's caught his attention. And then the guy suddenly stands up and he comes to this priest and he explains the whole thing to the priest. He explains the whole thing to the priest, how he went to nature, and he's like, that was a sign from God, right? And the priest is like, yeah. And then he's like, what is it then? Why wasn't he, after he tells him the story, he's like, why isn't God helping the wolf, the limbless wolf? The priest, Gnostic priest, looks at him and says, you were right about the event being like, for example, like a divine like a divine sign. But he says you mistook it. You are meant to be the lion. And that's the value of evolution. That's all I'm saying. That's the whole point of the story, guys. That there is, after some point, what else is there to do? Novelty is the only thing left. Let's say you were a person who, let's say you're right now caught in your past. You're like, I can't let go of my past. Okay, how long are you going to look at it? Just for how long are you going to look at your past? After some point, you're going to get bored and you're going to come to the present. And when you're in the present, you realize the kind of free space where the mind has its stage to move it. That means don't fear life because it happens in stages. Or don't fear the stage because it happens in stages. Life happens in stages. So anyways, guys, the whole idea was that our psychologies are evolving through stories. Stories pretty much are directing the attention of the life force of the being. Therefore, your attention is where you have access to the world and to the self simultaneously. Your attention is pretty much your health and your being and your world. Study your attention, and I think there's nothing greater you can study here on this rock. You know? And it's not just a rock, it's just that there must come a sort of responsibility with animating the inner realms by trusting it. That means it's like when a friend, imagine a friend comes to you and is like, can I share a story with you? And you're like, sure. Imagine you're like, no, I don't have enough evidence and proof to trust your story. It's like, what is that? You realize, no, the emotional stability of the moment is more valuable, that in the midst of all our intellect, there's a life being lived in various levels, and all those levels are fine. You know, it doesn't matter if you're like someone, you know, like a gardener or a stockbroker, you know? It's that there are eyes existing here, and the quality of life is really based on where this attention goes. That means I remember I was talking to someone about this, where I was saying, like, if you do what everyone's doing, you can, you know, and history has done that, you know, but you realize what is the gain? You get the same result. That means in life, attempting the new, whatever that is in your universe, is the way to its advancement. That means I'm not talking about this being an idea that, okay, do this and then you go to heaven. I'm saying if you want the moment to advance, you have to confront how it can be different. And that's really what evolution is. You have been growing with your world as you have been interpreting it. So we share stories, and we, in some sense, we keep the world alive in the eyes of the future generations, pretty much, because they might be born in such an artificial time that it's like, you know, in my science fiction, I've written of a time where the trees will be in history books. So nature has a value, but it is man's attention that keeps the world alive to himself. So that means every human being has a responsibility to literally treat all that you know as a boat or like some ship, and you're on an unknown sea, and everybody is in this unknown sea, and the collective effort is to build a civilization on unknown waters. That means we have to kind of really be serious with ourselves as a species. Like, alright, you know, the same way the caveman kind of discovered fire, imagine lightning hit a tree branch and that tree branch fell burning. The ape was like, oh my god, you know, the ape the ape took the tree branch and threw it on a bush, imagine, and everybody saw fire or something. Who knows? But you see that there was a sort of relationship develop, as if something wasn't there before and it was discovered. And I feel language and meaning and everything that is in the linguistic simulation, everything that is held as real by language, is in some sense a discovery of symbol attribution to sound and image. That means it's like this triangle of sound, the sound you hear, the symbol, and the image, and the symbol. Do you see? So the image. So when I say apple, there's the actual image of an apple, then there's a relationship to the symbol, the word apple. Do you see? And there's the relationship of the one who observes the apple before the meaning. Geometry is going to be the next great ally of the mind of man. Geometry, for me, I could see what the ancient Greeks saw in it. It held us. There was a sort of reverence they held for geometry. That means suddenly in nature you see geometry. Suddenly in nature you see something. You're like, okay, this is how the world is alive. This is how the world is breathing. This is how far the world has opened its eyes. And look at little old, little me in a macrocosm. Unfathomable to my eyes. It's like, what am I? I realize I am the small and the big, but the big is living while the small is. So am I really small? And then the mind opens up, where I say in this book I wrote called The Source of Language. And the book kind of reflects the title. It was my explanations on the source of language and how you are the source of language. And how would I say it? Like, first your eyes open in a world, then you realize how the world has opened your eyes, then you open up to the eyes of the world, then the eyes of the world open as you. And that's when the eyes of the world open as you, there's no concept of karma or any individualism. It is literally the contentment in the aftermath of the vanishing of the temporary. That means it's the aftermath of the simulations breaking down. For example, in certain ancient texts, they said the sky will crack, like in an apocalypse. So that's a suggestion, like a simulation breaking down, right? So in some sense, as if we are the simulation of higher dimensions, so in a strange way, we are the artwork of the beyond. That means pretty much, I would say, as a human being, develop a relationship with your own eyes that is, you can say, in the zero dimension. That means become comfortable with your intelligence, not just its physicality, but also its space. That's the key. Here's the thing, guys. This is something very crucial, I should say. If I ask people right now, I'd be fascinated for the comments of the viewers. Where does energy come from? I want to know what most people would answer. Let's make this the question of the day, guys. So guys, the question of the day, where does energy come from? I'm going to give you my answer. So guys, I'll tell you my relationship with energy. It's imposed. It's put forth. That's energy. Light extends itself. You project it. You project it. You simply, your inner realms, uh, sometimes I could say the mind moves like a melody that one has never heard before. Guys, Jake shares an incredible quote in the chat section. He says, "The universe is the ultimate free lunch." And Sean Carroll said this. And all economy majors are like, whoa. It's honestly just we gotta see something, in civilization. That means if you like, as much as I speak about like being aware of how your mind before a body, like sometimes your body's moving before your mind is. Some mornings it's really like that for me. I think, guys, energy is importance. Anything that is important for you energizes you. I'm not joking. Guys, I'm not joking. Energy is attention. And if there's something important in your attention, nothing pushes you. Like there's no breeze against you, you know? For how many eons can we be salmon, going the wrong way? Going against the stream. It's like even though there's something fishy going on in the universe, we're not fish. I'm telling you guys, one day, just wake up and ask yourself in the moment what is important for me and just go towards that and see what happens. You will see that your energy will become endless because most people exert energy by trying, not pre-seeing. Mind is attention. Guys, I had what I would say a sort of experience of an inner archetypal death. This was like a year ago. Some event happened that overwhelmed me and maxed out. It maxed out my fear, and then it maxed out my experience of kind of like how empty handed. And it wasn't anything like dangerous or something like that. It was just this situation that I was caught in, that it was chaos. I was caught in a sort of chaos. And that chaos made me see how empty handed I was. It was literally as if I felt, it was such an intense moment, I felt I might be like my attention's leaving, like my physical being. Like I felt like that. It's like, and it wasn't, it was a kind of inner fear. It wasn't an outer fear. It wasn't an outer fear of the form. It was this inner fear, like, oh, is it happening? You know? Is the transition of attention from form happening now? Do you know? And it was a very intense moment, and I felt this breeze, as if this wave hit my moment of being literally in that moment, where that breeze pushed aside everything. I was left as a witness, nothing else. It was as if I was left as a witness. The body was just there, everything was just there, sight was just there. And it was a very, very intense experience, because it gave me an emotion that my mind had never fathomed. It gave me the emotion of a glimpse into a raw, ultimate empty-handedness that is in the embedding of this process. So this is why to become aware of your mind is important. Do you know? I'm saying the attention is the most important thing to study. Yeah. And pretty much when all these yogis were like, ask yourself, who am I? Like that was their algorithm to the simulation of this elusive world, projected by the heavens, So that empty-handedness, even there's the story of Alexander the Great, where when he passed away, the tradition was that they would put him on a boat, and his corpse would, like this burning boat was the honor system that back then. And so Alexander the Great, in his will, he had written that his hands were, he wanted his hands to be wide open, And people were like, why was his hands open? Was this a Christian sign, or what was this? And people eventually they shared, no, it was that he was telling the world from this very sophisticated inner view that in some sense, I conquered, but time conquered me. I am leaving empty-handed. Even the greatest conquers, even those with the greatest things, if you don't reacquaint with your own eyes, it's kind of like strange. It's as if there was a mind here waiting to become active, Yeah, guys, it's something that no parent, no human being can prepare another human being for, the raw experience of how, yes, there is also emptiness. Because if you notice, most people are conditioned through a constructive mindset. They're like, be healthy and go for it. And as you go for it, you begin to see that you never questioned if the system was healthy. Do you know? That means many people, as I'm speaking, their whole experiences is based on them going into new environments. So you see this wave of human behavior that is integrative, that is collaborative, and you also see waves of human behavior that are watching the system. So what that means is Civilization 1.0 is like a fax machine. That means if an extraterrestrial landed, I would say, please go and come back later. We're too embarrassed to show our civilization to you. It's like, what are we going to do? Show you a fax machine? We need to advance the users of technology, and we need to advance the technology. And the technology there's an inner technology and outer technology. That means you as a human being, I feel the best way you contribute to your civilization, have the inspiration of some sort of engineer or designer. Go that road. Do you know that road is necessary for the advancement? That means it's like if we were giving medals for human beings who were contributing to human civilization, those who invented like actual external technologies that evolved our world, those inventors, in some sense, we give them a certain medal, and those people who in some sense went and thought about what is inner technology, the language that is defining. That means on some level we need people using the alphabet to work with words, and we also need a group of people studying why the alphabet is there. Do you know? So we have to utilize this, and what's going to happen is as human civilization becomes a more exciting collaborative effort, that means we just need at least maybe like 3 victories. 3 collective victories of the civilization, and then the ball is rolling. Do you know 3 massive shifts in suddenly a human being suddenly we're like, hold on a second. Am I on a rock in the middle of nowhere for only 100 years? Why don't I use this time to build the most advanced civilization just to see what it would look like? Like that's the only way I think the inner child's like, all right. The inner child's like, that's not ignorance. Go. Go forth, you know. Attention is your access point to objective phenomena. And imagine the physical realm right now as I'm speaking, this physical room is my objective realm. Now when it comes to my subjective realm, I don't give an image. I just say, all right, this is my objective realm, and I just very still and silent look at just what's here. I allow the ripples of the objective realm's pond to settle. And then after the ripples, after you're content with the objective realm, you're certain what is real in the objective, then your inner realms can more conveniently be engaged. So you in some sense have your attention on the objective. You don't just jump into like fantasy. Like that's like that never made sense. You have to pilot in your inner realms. It's space. It's literally like you gotta measure the space of movement even in your inner realms. And let me tell you, it is so possible. There's this guy. I could be getting his name wrong, but I think his name was Daniel Talbot or something. And this guy, he wrote a book called Numbers, if I remember correctly, and in this book, he was like this next level savant guy, where he memorized 10,000 digits of pi. Like if an AI was watching, the AI would clap with robotic hands for this guy. Like 10,000 digits of pi, this guy memorized it. And then in his book, he's explained how. And he's explained that when he closed his eyes, as he was like sitting on this chair, closing his eyes with a microphone, and then there's 8 people checking every number he's saying to see if it's correct. And he's going through, he's going into this kind of like pie pattern, you know? And as he's walking, behind his eyes, he's walking in a city. This guy was walking in a world behind his eyes. And when he would see something tall, he would suddenly say the number 9, and that was the exact number in the sequence. When he would see something, the next part of the road being separate, that means his mind had managed to see a numerical pattern and relate it somehow in his inner realms to something that was more world-like and three-dimensional. He had imbued life to numerology on the level of world building. And so that's how sophisticated, that's an example of how sophisticated the inner realms can move. And because we all have a different DNA, that's the cool thing. Whatever you do is technically creative, because nobody has your DNA and eyes. What you're doing is what you're doing. You see? There's something that it's like... the eyes of man are free to witness the realm. You know? That's the main thing to take away. That there's a freedom that is the opportunity of eons into now being something. I feel that there's nothing else. Like, I am just waiting for someone to come to me and tell me the argument of everybody's attention being on an advanced civilization is a bad argument. I just want to hear the counters to it. Because I'm telling you, it is the greatest game to play, you know? You know, so in a hilarious way, scribes in history were like video game checkpoints for human evolution of character. So guys, I guess this is pretty much the end of the talk. Wonder about novelty. That's definitely a privilege of the mind. It's like your lungs require oxygen, you know, and your mind requires novelty. The mind breathes anew through the evolution or the advancement of the experience. And when I say an advanced civilization, that would mean an advanced civilization with advanced inner realms. That means in that civilization, it surpasses, it becomes modern mythology embodied because efficiency was allowed first. This modern mythology means this kind of attitude. A child suddenly in this society where everybody has human strength shouts and says, I want to have the strength of a giant, like, 1,000 times bigger than me. This child says, I want to be the strongest being in the universe. And the people are like, in the universe, kid? This kid's got big dreams. He wants to be the strongest in the universe. And then we see, no, this kid, imagine, when he says this is what I mean of us moving into an era of advanced communication where we are embodying the modern myths. It's like archaic revival Terence McKenna spoke about. I could see how he caught on to the spark. Mr. Within is kind of speaking about the after, how the beams are moving after the spark. Do you know? And in some sense, this would. Anyways, I'll share it like this. That kid would attempt, and people would be like, "No, you can't be the strongest kid in the universe. You can't be the strongest being in the universe." That kid tries. That kid tries. Endless failure. That kid still's trying. In his inner realms, that kid is already that strength. That kid already sees the ability in the mind. You know. Now, imagine the civilization when the kid was like, I want to be as powerful as a giant or something. The civilization, instead of being like, big dreams kid, instead of that, the civilization was like, all right, this is a member of humanity. We must help this child. And all the greatest science labs and research labs all around the world decided to wonder and try to create a civilization where everybody had Superman strength. And imagine in the future, in a sci-fi setting, we found this juice that would make everybody into Superman. So it was, it's like orange juice. It was called super juice. Whoever drank it got superpowers. This is how legends are born, guys. Take notes. I'm joking. What I'm saying is, it's the ultimate attempt towards the ultimate. You see there's a possibility. In every moment, you can either react instantly with what you see, or you can watch, observe until there comes more info, and then you can endlessly observe. You can be agnostic till the end of time. Even if there is a truth, you can even be agnostic while the truth is there. The truth could be shaking your head, and you'd be like, I still don't know. I'm an agnostic. I don't know what's shaking my head. I don't know if the truth is the truth to itself. The agnostic will always find. The agnostic is pretty much like a bird trying to sit on the space between the branches. It just falls. My whole point is that civilization would not limit itself. It wouldn't be like, oh no, they could do something and we can't. It would try to advance the greatest vision of the past. That means I was like, this is the easiest way to make you can't be new to metaphysics and suddenly, for me, when I was introduced to Native American kind of metaphysics in my own studies, and just at some point I really went towards it, and I was like, what are they talking about? And I came to a realization that nature really doesn't need to have sound to relate to it. And after some point, you find yourself being able your attention to not go through various objective rooms, but also subjective rooms. You see, it was kind of me trying to solve this puzzle, and then I realized I am the puzzle. And then I'm like, how can I solve myself? And then I realized the self can't do anything to itself. The self can only be itself. So when I realized that the self can only be itself, then I wondered, what is this game of truth and illusion I have going on in my psychology? And then I realized it's just the known and the unknown. It's just how much light there is in the room of vision. So that kid can be encouraged. Every story has its future. That means the best business strategy I got from nature was nature doesn't rush. That's it. Believe it or not, if somebody told me what is the most ultimate thing, I would tell you it's how you're content with your being before you need it to be an object or subject. You see, I'm just saying we are creatures evolving beyond our language, and we have to develop. We have to literally all sit down and create the blueprint of an advanced civilization. What other option do we have? What other game is there? It's like, do we just like wait till it ends, or do we do something during the time? You know. So you see, vision has a value. What is there to really fight for? On some level, you can ask yourself. I remember I gave a talk on honor the other day. Like it's like, okay, what do I honor in this moment? And you see, first thing you have access is your inner realms. So it's so easy to honor your inner realms, just acknowledge it. But then you see what else is a greater value than your inner realms. Then you see all the life forms that are around you. Then you see you're in an actual world that is alive, that there's minds moving around. And all these minds don't realize it, but they're either going to technologically awaken to it. That means either they're going to connect their heads to computers first, or we're going to realize we're all drops in the same energetic ocean. So in some sense, the mind has a field-like access to all its parts. That means somebody can make this profound argument, even here as one of Mr. Within's kind of theories, that I feel if we wanted to take design as an automatic access point of resonance, we can say that imagine the frontal lobe of one human being and the frontal lobe of another human being, and all the frontal lobes of human beings that exist, they all are linked together in behavior just by the nature of their existential design. Everything that looks like each other has no choice other than to act different afterwards. So there's this constant clash of waves, where the person is sometimes an individual before they are, in some sense, a collective sense. Pretty much here's the kind of pathways. You're either living as an individual object or subject, or you are an unknown collective process happening in every moment. I think these are the two modalities. When I playfully say, when I step into the unknown, that means throughout the day, of course, you got to maintain so many systems. That means like conscious living is when the body can move the mind. Dream states is where your mind moves the body. So in your dreams, the more you act like a body, the less control you have of the dream. The more you act like a mind in the dream, the more you are the dream. Excuse me. I'm just saying, guys, this renaissance is gonna happen. The multidimensional renaissance is going to be when we become hunter-gatherers of our inner realms, and we care to share our inner realms, because you only have, like, there's no other place you can share. The world, every time you're in your conscious waking state, that's when your work begins. Your conscious work. Conscious work, the whole point of it is we've evolved again to have free will. So that means we were just this growing thing in nature with a certain speed. Then this growing thing felt separate enough to be itself. So we separated from nature. We individualized. The subjective evolution occurred. I'm just saying that it's a very unique time where culture strangely may move into this silence where we may all suddenly feel comfortable existing in the cyberspace. You know, like it's either human beings are realizing the value of the unknown value of each other's minds, or they are being trapped in their islands of what they feel they only know. You see, for me, when life becomes a process, it's like at that point, if somebody came up to you, what's your belief system? What do you think the purpose of life is? What do you think all this is? At that point, you'd be, it's a process. It's happening. You know, the unknown and the known are required. You have to oscillate between these two to exist as an individual. Anytime you feel you completely know, it takes you out of the sense that it takes you out of dualism. Pure knowledge, there's no image to it, and pure unknown, there's no image to it. It is only the oscillation between these spectrums that's becoming the nature of character and vision and whatnot. So anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. I hope this talk was helpful, and keep writing. Even though you might be a person who's not writing, but I'm talking to your future self, keep writing. Much blessings and else.